Thank you. I not only wrote about Forest City Ratner and their proposal for Atlantic Yards in Brooklyn, but I spent a good 6 to 8 years of my life working with a coalition of community neighborhood groups in the battle to really tame the monster. And I was contracted by the local city council person who had the courage to stand up to Forest City Ratner to pick apart the environmental impact analysis that was presented. And after those many years of community organizing and fighting and debating and discussion, it held up the project long enough for the economic collapse of 2008 to make its full realization impossible. So today, one little piece of it has been built, which is the basketball arena. If you come to Brooklyn, I'm glad to show it to you, and you can make up your own mind whether you like it. But the 16 towers of luxury housing have not been built. The fight goes on. So today, in a very brief few moments, yesterday I gave a talk at MIT. I won't have time to go through all of this, but I just want to make 3 quick points. First, and some of this comes from the lessons we've learned in New York City, but it's also lessons that people are learning in cities around the world. The first thing is, when we're talking about real estate development in large cities, anywhere in the world, we're talking about global real estate. It's a globalized sector of the economy that was previously very local. You could go up to your landlord and talk to your landlord, or you knew who the local real estate magnate was because they had their offices and they lived in the region. Today, real estate is dominated by global investment trusts, the real estate investment trusts, equity funds, investors from all over the world who put their money into a pot and go in to invest big time, especially in the centers of cities and on the edges of centers where land values are going up, and they can move in because they have enormous amounts of capital at their disposal to buy up land, to buy out politicians, and to fill the vacuum that cannot be filled, usually by local real estate, because they don't have the capital or the power to do so. So, just a few slides here. Let's go through. This is Dubai. Dubai is the excellent example. It's sort of the extreme example. It was built by global capital. The wealth from oil revenues, the Arab and the Emirates, and half of the buildings are empty because it's all speculative. So one of the things about this global capital is it doesn't have any real local roots. They don't have any commitment to the local area. They have very little knowledge of the local area. And so people are investing in houses, in office buildings that are half empty because people are using it for speculation. It's the pinnacle of the financialization of the real estate market on a global scale. Yeah, let's go see a few more. And here in Dubai, they have the replica of the Chrysler building in New York City. You can do anything. Go ahead. And you can even build an indoor ski center, and it's 120 degrees outdoors. Can you imagine the carbon energy involved in maintaining this year-round in the desert? Go ahead. Yeah, but it's also a tourist attraction. This is a mock-up of an old Bedouin village, which you will never find anywhere. Go ahead. Because they've been wiped out. So, Tokyo. So next, let me just say something about Forest City Ratner in the Atlantic Yards. I don't. What can we? go ahead to, this is New York City. Yeah, here we go. This was the original plan by Forest City Ratner for Brooklyn. Enormous, totally out of scale, in the middle of 4 neighborhoods made up of 3 to 6 story buildings, the highest of maybe 10, 20 buildings, and the tallest tower would even be taller than the existing tallest building in Brooklyn. This was the original plan. This is what people reacted to when they saw it, and this was a demonstration that one of the community members did using Google software that helped to animate the community reaction to the Forest City Ratner plan. Let's see. And so the opposition built. This is the local city councilwoman, Letitia James. And let me just say one other thing, very briefly, about how Forest City operates, or how they operated in Brooklyn, for sure. They do some things that are becoming more and more common by big real estate investors. When they're moving into a multiracial neighborhood, adjacent to this neighborhood is a large African American community, a fairly large Latino community, and what they did was extremely clever. They divided the opposition by race baiting. They said, we are here to solve the problem of affordable housing, and those people in opposition are against it, and they're all white homeowners. Well, after 6 years of working with the coalition, I can tell you it was racially divided on both sides. But it was a giant enough lie that they could use this to sell the project to people who were otherwise rather liberal, a lot of white liberals, and progressive, who were saying, well, look, at least it gets us a little bit of affordable housing. Well, so what did they do? Even before they publicly announced the site, they approached one group of housing activists locally, all African American, and said, who had opposed Forest City Ratner's previous plan, by the way, and demonstrated against them, and were able to stop a number of things. So they reached out to them in advance, in private, behind closed doors, and they made a deal. They said, we will give you 50% affordable housing, plus we'll train local people to work on the construction jobs, and you know that the white construction unions don't hire black people. We're going to do all of this. And Bruce Ratner is this nice liberal guy who worked in government for many years, whose son is was the director of the Center for Constitutional Rights for many years. So, hey, folks believed him. So they announced the project, 50% affordable housing, local hiring, and everybody applauds. But then we look at what's the affordable housing plan. 2 weeks after he announced the plan, they announced that they were going to add 2,000 condominiums that weren't part of the plan. Well, then 50% became 37%. Well, then we look at the 37%. What's the criterion for affordability? It goes up to 160, 180% of the area median income. Now, what's the median income in the working class neighborhoods, the African American, Latino neighborhoods around? It's around 35,000. So it's very clear. So then if we take into consideration the local income structure, our calculations show that only 7% of the housing units would be truly affordable to local people in the 4 neighborhoods. and particularly the low-income people. So it was a scam. It was an affordable housing scam. Hiring. Bruce Ratner cleverly created a group and financed a group that would lobby for local jobs. And they became, they and the organization that negotiated affordable housing signed a community benefits agreement. Now, understand this. Community benefits agreement started out in California when a group of residents and unions got together and they said, you're building this Staples Center, but we get nothing out of it. So they wrote a community benefits agreement that was discussed openly and publicly and voted on and agreed to by both the developer and the community, recognized community organizations. This community benefit agreement was signed, sealed, and delivered before the project was publicly announced. And part of the agreement was that the organizations that supported it could not speak publicly in opposition to Forest City Ratner. Wow. So this was, and when our lawyers looked at the community benefits agreement, it was very clear that there were so many options out of it that it was so weak. And today, more than 10 years from the time the project was announced, not one housing unit has been built, and not one affordable housing has been built. There's a promise that a building might go up. It was supposed to go up last year. Now it's not happening. So, where are the goods? And the organization that Bruce Ratner created and funded, half of that organization left that organization to take Bruce Ratner to court because they never got training, much less a job. So all of these things sound absurd and irrational, but look, when you're looking at a local government that's not giving you affordable housing, that's not responding to the job demands, people are anxious to get something. The problem is when you take the offer before the project is even announced. So anyway, part of the other problem with the project was it required condemning vast amounts of several city blocks, which included low-income housing. Rental housing was occupied by low-income people who were basically given relocation costs and promised that they would be able to come back within 3 years when the housing gets built. It's been well over 3 years, the housing hasn't been built, they have no right to return. And so the fight was also against immigrants. So the final chapter, and here I want to go into the third point I want to make. So the first is real estate has become global, extremely powerful, extremely clever in co-opting and utilizing the existing divisions in neighborhoods. And the second point is about Forest City Ratner, but the third point is the role of coming up with alternatives. Community planning. In my book, I talk about some 100 community plans in New York City that have developed in the last 50 to 60 years. We did an alternative, I said we, Letitia James supported and sponsored a community plan for the site, the Unity Plan. One of the charges made against the community organization was, well, you're just against all development. You're not in my backyard, and you just don't want big buildings. Well, I don't have a picture here of the design that came out of this workshop, but it includes a lot of big buildings, but not as many as Forest City Ratner wanted, and it excluded the displacement of existing community residents. So it was only building on available land. This is a map of the community plans that have developed in New York City. Those dots, each represents a plan, but they're interestingly clustered in areas that have been the target of large-scale development. The plans are not just somebody's utopian idea about dreaming up a future vision. They come out of people's desire to say, we won't move, we have an alternative. And the alternative includes development, but the kind of development that we want. So this was the first community plan in Cooper Square on the Lower East Side. This was dated back to the late 1950s. Robert Moses, the development czar in New York City, came up with this idea to create an urban renewal area, 12 blocks, level it, and displace the existing tenants and build new high-rise housing. So they organized and they did their alternative plan. They had the support of a professional planner who lived in the neighborhood, and you could stay. No, go ahead. Yeah, right there. And I'll just end there. And they were successful, so that no tenants were displaced, and all of the existing vacant land was developed, not 100% low-income housing, which was their alternative plan, but 60%, which is not too bad, given that the crumbs that we tend to be offered today are around 15 or 20%. If you use true affordability as a criterion, that is truly affordable to local people, not to people who are living at income levels that go beyond the immediate neighborhood. And our last couple of examples from New York is public housing. 2 weeks ago, the New York City Housing Authority announced their plan to build high-rise luxury housing on public housing sites. And their story was, we don't have any money, we can't get any money, this is the only way we can fix the boilers, and we can do the capital repairs that they have left undone for the last 10 years. We're working with the tenants of public housing towards requiring a community plan, because it's not true that people living in public housing would not like to see something different in their development. For years and years they've been complaining, why can't we have some retail so we can have local stores to shop in? And the Housing Authority did nothing. That would have been a revenue generator. But there hasn't, the discussion is very unequal, because the authority begins with all the power and with a long history of paternalism towards tenants, and doesn't think that tenants have any good ideas. So I believe if people sit down and talk, and particularly the young people in public housing, they have brilliant ideas about how best to use the land. And it may involve some new development, but it may not. They cherish every single inch of open space and recreational area. So the Housing Authority wants to build on playgrounds. So the last example is Chinatown Lower East Side, where I'm working with a coalition of groups in Chinatown Lower East Side, Chinese, Asian, and Latino, that opposed the rezoning in the area because it excluded public housing. The city said, oh, we don't need to protect public housing because it's public housing. And the Housing Authority will protect public housing. Lo and behold, 2 weeks ago, they were proven, the community people were proven right, and the city bureaucrats were proven wrong. The Housing Authority is not protecting public housing. They're selling it off to global investors to build housing that has no relationship to the existing surrounding housing and community, who have never been involved in the discussions and in the planning and have had nothing to say. So they are working now on an alternative rezoning of the area that will protect public housing, but will also protect Chinatown, where global investors are moving in, building hotels, tearing down tenements, and building luxury high-rise apartments. And so these are just sort of, to wrap up, a few examples of where community and neighborhood groups, I think, are going and need to go, which is not just to be able to say no, but to also to be able to say, yes, this is what we want. Stick to your guns and don't take the first plan that comes out, because the plan was invariably cooked up by real estate investors that have no connection to the city and to the place. They can't. Thank you.